everybody. Welcome to a a very strange thing for me to do, which is to live stream, which I don't really do anymore. But I am very busy all the rest of the upcoming weeks in 2025, and so I thought I would take the one Saturday I have free to do this. And happy Black History Month, everyone, since it's February 1st.
Yeah.
I'm joined today, since you think I'd be sick of talking about World of Darkness. I'll never get sick of talking about World of Darkness, but I thought I wouldn't talk about it alone, so just yapping to myself alone. So I'm here with Avery. Avery, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. It's me, Avery, at Averydaboi on all of the social media platforms, including Twitch, where I should stream more, but that's its whole another beast. Yeah, and I'm a consummate lover and player of World of Darkness, going on my 16th year in the sphere. So very happy to be here.
Yeah, very happy to have you here. Thank you for agreeing to join me when I impromptu messaged you and said, "Hey, want to join me for a live stream?"
Yeah,
And if you don't know, Avery and I spend a lot of time playing games together. That's sort of our thing. Avery's been in a lot of my games. Firstly, has been Edgar Waite in Berlin Bloodlines, has been Sense to Sweetwater, and another character, just in case you haven't seen it, in Of Bane and Blood. And we'll be playing Vern Rasmussen in the upcoming Cradle of Liberty, which is the next game you'll see on my channel, the Boston game. And what else do you have going on, Avery? Real quick.
I am the storyteller for the game Blood of the Covenant. It is a V5 story in Charleston, West Virginia, over on the Rolling Nomads. You should definitely check that out. That'll be a very good time. And I might just be cooking a big old pot of other games up, and they'll be coming out as they mature.
Yes, they mature. Very good. So we have a list of topics that we're going to talk about today. In addition to, if there's any questions that you have, throw them in here. It can be about anything World of Darkness related, anything about us personally to a point, and also anything about the games that we have run or have been in. So let's start with you, Avery. Oh my God, it's like I'm interviewing you.
I know, it's crazy.
Where did you get your start in World of Darkness?
So, this is kind of a two-pronged thing for me. I got started playing World of Darkness around the age of 14. My older brother had a table, and I asked if I could sit down with them, and they said sure. And they had this very motley crew of Bruja and Gangrel and Nosferatu. And I rolled in with Aventru, and they had no idea how to react to me because I was much younger than them, and I just rocked in with so much swagger, it was ridiculous, and I kind of ran roughshod over this coterie of vampires, and that was a lot of fun. But as far as owning materials, I had a relative pass away in the early 2000s, and they left to me their entire suite of World of Darkness, and they had bought every source book that had come out since 1996, I think. So I inherited quite literally over 1,000 pounds of books, and I fell in love with the parts that I liked, and there are some books that I still have yet to crack because I really got 5 pages in and I was like, ew. So that's that's my basis in WoD.
Okay, now you ask me.
Honey, how did you get your start in WoD?
Well, this is a story I've told before, so if you follow me anywhere, you probably heard the story. I got my start in World of Darkness by playing Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines on this channel when it was just a channel where I played video games, and I became obsessed real fast. And that obsession led all the way to me. Now I work with Paradox Interactive and work with the World of Darkness team, and I make lots of cool stuff that you can see all over the socials, and more stuff that'll be coming out that I can't talk about yet.
We love that little can't talk about it yet.
Not yet. But soon. So that's how you do that. And I need to say something to your story of how you came into as someone who's been your storyteller now for how many games? Going on 3 games now?
Yeah. Yeah.
I can absolutely believe that you would walk into the room with so much swagger that you blow everyone's minds. I can completely believe that. I've seen it
Yeah.
firsthand.
And it was so strange and transformative at that age too. I was just coming into my own as a teenager and as an adult, and I took this idea that I wanted to play out, and I was like, I'm not going to go halfway. I'm going to come in at full speed, and if I hit a brick wall, sayonara, baby.
Avery's playstyle is like Avery's love, hard and fast.
Yeah. Hey.
And yeah, but little did Avery know at the time that's perfect for my particular brand of storytelling and playstyle. New Mage stuff. Whitney, when there's new Mage stuff, I'll be screaming about it everywhere.
Yeah.
Would love there to be new Mage stuff.
Same. Say.
Yeah, so let's talk about the first. Now, we talked about the first time you ever played World of Darkness or how you got into World of Darkness. Let's talk about the first game you ever ran, because I think there's a big thing between going from player to storyteller. I did a silly thing where I played once and then became a forever storyteller. I don't think that's the normal trajectory.
No, that's a bold choice, Cotton.
So why don't you tell me about the first time you were a storyteller?
Yeah, so I had been playing Vampire and Werewolf in their 20th edition formats for a while. And I had built up a group of friends that we had played a lot of TTRPGs together. But none of them had ever played World of Darkness before. And I asked, my group of friends, I was like, hey, do you guys want to, pull the trigger on this and do it? And they were like, oh yeah, it would be crazy to play a game where there were like real world cities and we could go to real world places. And I was like, okay, where do you want to go? And they were like, the biggest city in the state that we live in. I was like, guys, we can go there on a bus. Are you sure you want to do this? And they said, yes. So I had built up this whole city, and they had decided that they wanted to play Werewolf the Apocalypse as their first WoD game. I think maybe they weren't quite ready to confront the massive political overtones of Vampire in older editions, because let me be very clear, Vampire in older editions was rife with political drama. There was no real way to get out of it. The Anarch movement wasn't really a thing yet. They were just this whisper and a rumor on the West Coast, and that was kind of it. So they decided to play Werewolf. And I went whole crazy in forging this storyline for them. We went through their first change, and they went on this crazy spiritual journey in the Umbra, and when they popped back out in their Sept, there was this lost pup waiting for them. And they were like, okay, what spirit guided you here? And it was Dragon, the patron spirit of the White Howlers. So the story very swiftly became them being very protective of this younger Garu that they were looking after, that was one of the last White Howlers, and keeping him safe from the Black Spiral Dancers. And it was very sweet, and it became a story that was as much about them being rage-filled monsters fighting against the corruption of the worm as it was about making sure you have something to give the next generation, that it's not all just empty promises and hollow tomorrows, that you have to leave something behind for those who come next.
I think you very much put that into your playing of Sense of Sweetwater in our Werewolf Chronicle, so I definitely see that correlation there. My first game storytelling was Blood on the Grand Strand, which you can watch right here on this channel. My very first game I ever storytold, I did it live, like we are live right now, and online. With nothing. I've never run a home game before. I've never done it. In-person game, never done it.
So bold.
I just have the gay audacity to do stuff like that. Yeah, but speaking of the multifacetedness of the World of Darkness, that things don't always have to be, as you said, sort of in the older lore, a lot of things like sort of lean towards, werewolf rage, vampire politics. There's lots of different sort of beats to these games that we all love. So let's talk about the 5 big splats. You ready? We discussed this. We discussed this point privately. I was curious.
Yeah,
So the 5 big splats. Now we can say 6 if we want to include Hunter the Reckoning, but we don't have to.
sure.
But the 5 big splats, I want to know the order that you put them in, starting from favorite to least favorite.
Sure. I will always put Vampire the Masquerade and Mage the Ascension as tied for 1. I can't separate my love for either of them. I love them both very much in very different ways. When I get into what do I love about Vampire, as far as being the most well-rounded, I think there's no dispute. It's Vampire. There's something for every player in Vampire the Masquerade, and it's always been that way. There has always been something for whatever vein of darkness you want to tap in Vampire, and in similarity, the way that Mage used to be run, which I'm so excited to see where they go with it for any sort of 5th edition supplement. It was very free-formed. It was all about what did you believe you could do with the resources that you had and things of that nature, which created a very unique storytelling environment for everyone else around and everyone at the table, and it created some truly unique role-playing situations, in my opinion. Second/third is got to be Werewolf. Werewolf I've always been drawn like a moth to flame to werewolf stories in general. The first horror movie I ever watched was The Wolfman. I the first time I watched Underworld, I was totally on the side of the Lycans,
Weren't we all outside of Kate Beckinsale?
uh, obviously. And a Werewolf just has this quality about it that seems to bring its tables closer together. Even if the characters push against each other and bump heads, because there's always going to be characters with personalities that don't jive. I've always felt like when you walk away from a Werewolf Chronicle, you walk away knowing the people that you played with better and feeling closer to them in that regard, and in that way I'll always love Werewolf for that. And even in our experience with Werewolf 5, that I feel like that is more true than it has ever been. The cast of Vein and Blood, of course, we've all been friends, for a long time, but I feel exponentially closer to everyone that was at that table after that game. Next is Wraith. Wraith to me was so far ahead of its time. Wraith in its previous incarnation, which again, crazy excited to see if we ever get a 5th edition supplement for Wraith. But there was this thing that happened in Wraith where you made your character, and then the player to your right got to be your shadow. So there was this crazy level of like everyone had to know each other's characters in your group of Wraiths, and you had to know how to play to the worst instincts of the player to your left.
Yeah, and it absolutely had to do, and you have to make sure you understand the type of shadow that they have, because there are multiple different kinds.
Exactly. And it was just this crazy experience, and it was so much fun. I will never forget the first time I ran as Wraith, and I was pitching it to my playgroup, and I was like, okay, so the person to your right, and they were like, can we switch spots at the table? And they did musical chairs around the table until they finally found the person they wanted to play their shadow, and it was so funny. I
think that's actually a great way to do it, honestly.
It was so much fun. I'll never forget just sitting behind my DM screen with a glass of wine, watching them do musical chairs around the table to find what fit most with them, what resonated with them the most, and to have these deep discussions. I remember two of my players were standing, off in the corner of the room, kind of talking about it, and I overheard a little bit when they were like talking about how they needed their shadow to kind of cajole them, almost like a guilted lover. And I was like, yo, hold on. These talks are getting very big and very personal. And of course, this was before the culture of TTRPGs had changed to, consent sheets and things, which is, let me be very clear, the most positive change I've ever seen in the culture of tabletop community. In the almost 20 years that I've been a part of the tabletop community. They were breaching those kinds of conversations, having conversations about who they wanted to play their shadow. And in that regard, this is why I say Wraith was so ahead of its time. And I love it. And now it does end up falling as my quote unquote least favorite. But Changeling has to fall at 5 on my list.
I want everyone to know I gave them shit about this. Before.
Yes. And to be clear, I enjoyed every time I played Changeling the Dreaming. I never had a bad time playing Changeling the Dreaming. The storytellers that I had for Changeling the Dreaming were absolutely stunning. However, there's a disconnect for me. I never felt like I had much of a childhood. So these core concepts of holding on to both the light and the dark of the childish mind, because as much as we can say Changeling is a game about holding on to the innocence that the world is slowly ripping away from you, in the Dreaming you also had, your red caps and your unseelie fae that were very much about, we don't want you to hang on to your childhood innocence, we want you to hang on to your childhood fear. And
Slua for the win, sorry.
Yeah, Slua for the win. Take their voice, make them whisper. It's all good. But yeah, I never had much of a childhood, so it's very hard for me to connect with the themes of Changeling, as both a player and a storyteller. So, I have to put that one at the bottom of my list, but not because I don't love it. I do. I think it's a fantastic game. I watch a lot of people who play Changeling, because I want to see other people spark joy and have fun and get that fulfillment out of it that I don't get. So yeah, that's my list.
One
How about you, honey?
My one Outstar wants your sweater.
I will have to harass my mother-in-law about making you one. Send me a measure.
So that's your old man sweater. Two, it's very okay. I gave Avery a lot of crap for their list, but it's only because I really love Changeling, and I'll talk about Changeling in just a second. But it's really important, the last thing that you said. None of these are because we don't like them. When we talk in the top 5, I think it's probably the themes that resonate with us the most. You can correct me if I'm wrong. And the bottom ones are just the ones that are a little bit harder for us to grasp, or we think that we might not run them competently or play them competently.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. 100%.
So number 1 top spot for me has to be, okay, so with a caveat here, right? Number 1 top spot is Vampire the Masquerade. Sorry, I know that is such a basic answer, but it is. It's my favorite game. However, if Wraith was different mechanically, in the sense of the shadow, and the sense, I would never run Wraith today. I would never run 20th anniversary edition Wraith today. But if Wraith was a little bit different, if Wraith was brought a little bit more into 5th edition, I don't know how they would do it, but if they would brought it a little more into 5th edition, I would probably put it on par with Vampire, because the themes of Wraith resonate with me so much, because I'm just like a spooky chick, like I'm not like other girls, you know what I mean? Sorry. I really like that. I really love, and anyone who's played any games or watched any of my games where the main theme is despair. The players are always in a certain state of despair. That really resonates with me. I really like that. Don't know what it says about me, but I love it. In the lore of Wraith, if anyone's watched my LA by Night recap videos recently, I go off on multiple tangents multiple times talking about Wraith for like 40 minutes. It's really bad, and I've edited them. So Vampire and Wraith are really, really similar to me. Vampire because it's obviously because it's the first game that I got into, but also because it's so adaptable to so many themes. There's so much you can do with Vampire the Masquerade that it's just it's the plug and play game that also can be as in-depth as running Wraith or Werewolf or Mage. Second for me, so sort of those two are hard for me to put together, but second for me is definitely Mage. I couldn't, for a similar reason, I could never run Mage. I'm not smart enough to run Mage. I'm not smart enough or philosophical enough or deep enough to run fucking Mage. Do I love the lore and the concept of Mage? Yes, I love it. I am deeply familiar with the lore and how things work, but I could never see myself running it because I feel it's a little too weirdly crunchy, but also too nebulous for me to wrap my head around. And also I'm not smart enough to do it. Don't ask me to do it. I'm not smart enough.
I think you did hit on a very good point there about Mage. It is that it is somehow the most nebulous and also the crunchiest.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
It's very like mechanically Mage was like you can do whatever you want as long as you can convince your ST that you have, the dots and the spheres to make it happen. But also like hold on, wait a minute. Like
okay, two things I want to point out from the comment section here. Johnny Rotten Studios, Echoes of New York. If you want to see how Wraith could be played and how you could imagine Wraith running in like a Wraith 5th edition, please go watch B. Dave Walters run Echoes of New York. He ran a whole series of all of the big 5, all of them New York themed, and Echoes of New York is my favorite one. In the last live chat I did for LA by Night, he was in there and I just was like, I loved it so much. And I couldn't stop talking about it, embarrassing myself, fangirling all over him. Please go watch it though. It's absolutely incredible. And I'm blanking on who ran that at this moment. I need to cough. Secondly, Outstar. Changeling the Lost was sprinkled from the Dreaming. Yes, I think it's a really common consensus in the community that Changeling the Lost did Changeling better than Changeling the Dreaming. Thoughts, Avery?
Yeah, so the one big issue that I had, because I played a lot of the Dreaming. The one big issue that I had with the Dreaming was purely like lore based. And they fixed everything that I had like despised about the lore of the Dreaming in the Lost. And so I feel like a lot of the tables that I ended up playing at, when I would voice that, they would be like, oh yeah, no worries. We take a lot of the lore from the Lost and use the mechanics of the Dreaming. And I was like, okay. I'm not always a super huge fan of kit bashing things, but in that sense, it worked so well. Changeling the Lost's lore was, in my opinion, the only thing that sparked joy for me from Chronicles of Darkness. Because what they did with the Lost was visionary. Again, I feel like in the same way that Wraith the Oblivion was ahead of its time, Changeling the Lost was very far ahead of its time. I feel like if there is a V5 and there isn't a kind of leaning towards what they did with the Lost lore-wise, I feel like that's a big missed opportunity, but not the end of the world. But it is certainly an opportunity I would like to see them take with gusto.
I'm going to circle back to what you said in a second. I do want to say something about Changeling. So I put Changeling above Werewolf in my list. Werewolf for me is the most, what is the word? I'll just say alien of the games. It's the hardest for me to really grasp onto. I have very little like personal emotional connection with like the lore of like lycanthropy and stuff. So that speaks to me the least. I appreciate the themes. I enjoy the themes, and a lot of the themes, certain themes speak to me, but as a whole, it speaks to me less than Changeling. And I'm going to say why Changeling speaks to me so much, and I'm going to get real for a second, and this is live, so I can't edit anything out that I say. So I am a person who was raised in a cult, and inside the cult, I got a lot of things taken away from me in the sense where, and I'll use a really good example here. I never grew up with a television. But I lived in the city of Boston. So obviously people around me had televisions, and my grandfather gave me a pair of binoculars so I could watch birds because I didn't have TV, and I wasn't also allowed to read. So it was like, I had to like do something. So I used the binoculars to spy on my neighbors. I was a child, and that sounds very bad. So don't take that out of context. But I was a child, and I was very curious about what other people's lives were like, because in addition to all of those other things, I was also very isolated from my neighbors and from making friends. And so I discovered what TV was. And I remember that my neighbor across the street, who was a very elderly lady with a lot of cats, was watching Friends. I didn't know what that was. She was watching the new episode of Friends or whatever. And so I was watching it through the binoculars, and I started becoming more and more obsessed with watching the TV, or like, being so interested in trying to figure out what it is. And that was taken away from me. When my mother found out, she took the binoculars away, and also I had to move rooms in the apartment. So I couldn't even look with my plain eyes out to see what the TV was. So in those instances of removing the innocence or removing the wonder from a child's eyes, speaks to me on a very deeply emotional level and a deeply personal level. So when I first read Changeling, it's like, I think I read the introduction to the 20th anniversary edition, and it just like, yup, I get this. Is that a theme, the game of Changeling, one that I feel drawn to run in a constant place? Not really. If there was Changeling 5th on my table right now, I'd be running it tomorrow. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah, that'll do it.
And speaking of the big five, we didn't mention Hunter, because Hunter, not quite the same. They didn't get their 20th. They jumped right to 5th, right? I love Hunter. I sort of put Hunter outside of the big five because it doesn't have quite the legacy that the other ones have. I personally think Hunter's amazing. It's the scariest of all the games because you're just a person and you can die so easily. Ask me how my character almost died in the official campaign.
Yeah, I went back at not directly at Huddy's behest, but at a strong nudge. Huddy was like, "You should go back and read Hunter 5th." And God, that was almost a year ago. And I remember finishing it, and I remember thinking to myself, if I was to have someone who had never played World of Darkness before, I would have them play Hunter first. Because I feel like there's no better way for a first-time WoD player in the 5th edition arena to get a good grasp on what the world actually is, not the lies that vampires tell to dilute themselves, or not the stories of heroism that werewolves tell themselves. If you want an actual person's naked-eyed view of the world around them, it's Hunter the Reckoning. And in that sense, I feel like it's always very important when playing these games to understand that to play a monster in this setting, regardless of the type of monster, there are lies that they must tell themselves to feel human. And I think being able to separate out about your character what are the lies that they tell themselves and what are the truths is very important to navigating the WoD sphere in a competent way. And so with all of that being said, I think the only responsible thing for me GMing first-time players for 5th edition games is to start them with Hunter.
Well, that perfectly loops back around to the thing that I wanted to say before I talked about, and you didn't hear any of that, the cult stuff. You didn't hear any of that. Perfectly loops back around to what I wanted to say, is that you and I have known each other, oh God, about 2 years now, right?
Yep.
We've had lots of discussion. This us talking is sort of what we do all the time anyway. About World of Darkness. Now, you had a lot of now it's okay if you don't want to go too deeply into detail with us, but correct me if I'm wrong, you had a lot of let's say baggage from Legacy Edition, that so much so that there were certain things that were brought into 5th edition that you didn't want to engage with at all because you had such baggage left over from Legacy. Do you want to expand on that a little bit, or however much you want?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the big things was there's a LARP in Southern Ohio, a werewolf LARP that I wrote storyboard for years. I mean, most of the years of my adult life, I spent writing for the storyboard for this LARP. And this LARP started drawing more and more very alt-right leaning men into its sphere, because unfortunately that was an environment that we can say how much we love these old WoD games, but it was an environment that's almost specifically old Werewolf brought in a lot of alt-right leaning authoritarian men. And it got so bad that I didn't want to engage with Werewolf anymore. I stopped writing for that LARP. I was like, I don't really want to do this anymore. Like, these people are sucking the joy out of it for me because I'm putting out these emotionally complex, narratively complex storylines for these, 3 players that we've had for 5+ years that have this pact together. And I played it with that in mind, and the stories that they had wanted to tell for their characters, and the storylines were just getting stomped all over by neo-Nazis, and it broke my heart, and I really didn't want to engage with Werewolf anymore. And to be very clear, and I'm going to say this, and I'm going to put this out into the ether, and I'm going to say it with my whole chest. I played a lot of Get of Fenris in old World of Darkness. Do I agree that they needed to be made to antagonists into V5? You bet your ass I do. They were too far gone. Read any source book on the Get of Fenris in W20 and tell me that they weren't already teetering on the edge. You can't. It's
to that point, I think like leading up, like even me myself, and before Werewolf came out, I don't think it was you, but I think it was me and Ramos were talking, who's in the chat, was sort of talking about, we're like, is it gonna be Red Talons or Get Offenders? We kept going back and forth, like, it's gonna be the Red Talons or Get Offenders, it's gonna be one of them. That was always what we were talking about before the book came out.
Yeah, for sure. And then also I had gotten into a vampire table, where I had a player playing Clan Ravnos, and they really ruined me on that clan for a very long time, because everything was just, fairy dust. Nothing ever hit the ground. Everything was superficial. It seemed like they were playing everybody's idea of depressed goblin nightmare boy. Like, it was just, everything was a joke to them, and it really kind of ruined me on it for a while, because I had sat down with this person out of character and was like, hey, let's talk about this. Let's see if we can find a happy medium. Let's see if we can find our pacing. Let's make it work. And we'd walk away from all of those conversations like we had reached an understanding, and then we'd sit down at the table the next week and it'd just be right back to the same old thing. And again, at Huddy's behest, I've gone back and I've read what they've done with the Ravnos in 5th edition, and I don't hate it. I like it a lot more than what I was holding on to this kind of scar about. And I think that's very important for those of us who did have a lot of old World of Darkness experiences. there's a certain amount of it that you need to talk to your ST to see what lore they wanted to bring from the old and what they didn't. But you kind of have to let go of your scars and read everything through a new light. You know, when I first prepping for Sense the Sweetwater, when I first read the Gale Stalkers, I was not a fan of their incarnation by a name that I will not speak into the existence in the old world of darkness. But when I read them as the Gale Stalkers, I said, this follows a logical chain of progression. This is not just bald-faced cultural appropriation. I can get behind this. And so to all of my other WoD old heads that may or may not be out there, I must say it has been a truly rewarding experience to let go of the baggage that I was holding on to surrounding some of these IPs and read them again with fresh eyes and allow myself to see the narrative through this new lens.
You're perfect interview partner, because now I can bring it back to the next topic, is like, what don't we like about what's in 5th edition? This is perfect. It's because you know, there are things that we don't like in Legacy, obviously. And if I start talking about Jan Petus Noon, I'm going to lose my mind, which I already did again in my LA by Night recap that I released a few days ago. So, and like, it's just like me getting closer to the camera and like really because I hate that fictional man more than I've hated any other fictional man in my life. But yes, why don't we talk about the next topic, which is what we like from Legacy and what we don't like from Legacy, and what we like from 5th edition and what we don't like from 5th edition. So let's start with, since you started the list off, let's start with Mage. What is your favorite thing about Mage? And we have to just include Legacy because there is no Mage 5th at the moment.
My favorite thing about Legacy Mage is they detailed the depth of the metaphysical realms in even greater detail than they did in Werewolf. The idea of traveling through these metaphysical realms, traveling through the internet, things of that nature, the internet being its own metaphysical realm, and the virtual adepts being, you know, the stewards of the internet and things like that. That was always so fascinating to me, that you could tell this story that was very much rooted in the real world, but had branching ripples out into these multiple metaphysical realms surrounding it. And there was a slang term in the jargon section in the old Mage book, talking about Merlins. These mages who had grown too powerful to exist in the mortal realm for very long, so they would retreat into one of these metaphysical realms, or, God help you if they were powerful enough, create an entire pocket dimension of their own where they existed as a god.
Can I say something?
Sure. Yeah, go for it.
Because it's never going to see the light of day. Is that why you had that thing with the virtual adept and that Transylvania Beckons thing that's never going to see the light of day?
Yes.
Because like, we spent a lot of time with that. And I'm like, oh, Avery really likes this.
Yes. Yeah. So I'll go ahead and say it because it'll never see the light of day. The epilogue that I did for Huddy's character, Gisela from Transylvania Beckons, which you should go back and watch that. Maybe not. I don't know.
It's not 5th edition, but. But I do a German accents the entire time, like Gisela.
Yeah. And this nun, this ancient vampire German nun, got pulled into the interwebs because Gisela's old, shall I say, protege, the La Sombra Fleur, had struck up a relationship with a virtual adept.
Hot. Right? What a nerd.
And yeah, so that was great. Now I will say the thing that I like the least about Mage in its old incarnation is that I always felt like we never really needed mechanic. And I feel like that is certainly a weakness of a game, because at the end of the day, even if a game is rules light, the rules that it does have matter. And that when we think about playing a game, what is a game? It is inseparable in the human mind from a game having rules, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mage to me felt like the rules never really mattered.
You and I have the same dislike.
Because there was always a magical way around it. Because it was all of the spheres were just these free-form ideas of what you could do. And if your arete was high enough and you had enough quintessence in your system, the rules were just playthings.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes,
that, to me, when I look at playing a game, specifically from the storyteller's seat,
which is how I view all games, the lens through, yep.
It becomes infinitely more difficult for me to try and tell the story that I want to tell when, you know, a rank 4 mind mage can literally just walk into your memories and start picking through them like it's a library.
Yeah. Ugly Bad Good, that is a very interesting comment. We are going to talk about that in a minute. So hold on to that thought. We will talk about that. Yes, we have the same dislike for Mage. What I like about Mage, again, I am not a huge fan of the way that it's run, the mechanics, so that sort of I have to leave aside. I'm a huge fan of the traditions. I think outside of a few, I think that they are really unique, and easier to grasp, I dare say, than some kith and even clans.
Yeah. Yeah. It's certainly to make the most direct comparison. I think it will always be easier for a player to read the Order of Hermes,
yes,
and Mage, and pick it up and be able to run with it as a first-time player than it will ever be for a person to look at Clan Tremere, understand it, pick it up, and play it.
Yeah, I would have to maybe. Yeah, you know what? Yeah, maybe not Tremere so much, but like definitely like Samitsi.
Sure, or again, Huddy and I just talked about this the other night. You know, it will always be easier for someone to understand what a Cult of Ecstasy mage is about.
Yeah.
But if you take that same player and you try and hand them a clan ministry character, there are probably going to be some struggles there.
Yes. Yes.
We've
learned all sorts of fun new struggles with me playing a ministry character for my first V5 game.
Yeah, shout out to all the other storytellers with ministry characters out there. Let me give you a tip. If you don't already realize, you don't need to put them under their compulsion all the time. Come up with some other creative
rough
solution.
Compulsion
Yeah,
that will turn them into a white way sooner than you want to, especially if you're running an actual play where you like paid people to make you overlays and stuff. It kind of sucks.
Yeah. You got to be careful.
Whoopsies. It's fine. It's fine. Avery can handle it.
Yes.
Fine, Avery can handle it.
Indeed.
Yeah. So, Ugly Bad Goods question. Which we can sort of combine these. Because the other thing we want to talk about is things that aren't in 5th, right? So we'll sort of talk about Mage since it's not in 5th. Bringing Mage into 5th. Now, Ugly Bad Good says, if they did try to do Mage 5th. They can tone down the really wild stuff to make it more grounded, which doesn't seem like a great idea to me. Now, Ugly Bad Good, you and me, we go way back to the Josephine McAdams Discord. You and me go way back. I have to disagree. That's exactly what I would want from Mage. I would want things to be much more street level magic. But I want to hear. But Avery is much more experienced with Mage than me, so I want to hear their opinion.
Yeah, my general opinion on bringing Mage into 5th edition all revolves around the core oculus of what have they done with the other splats moving into 5th ed, which seems to be bringing things back to a manageable level. You know, and insofar as to The stories that are being encouraged with the sphere around 5th edition are stories that are closer to home. They are stories that are a little bit more human, a little bit more accessible, a little bit more motivated by the current geopolitical ethnic sphere. And in that regard, the things in Mage in 20th anniversary edition were not street level or easily accessible at all. And for some people that works. For most people that I've met, it does not.
He's talking about me.
And so I hope they scale it back at least a moderate amount. I think I would like to see the spheres looking a little bit more like disciplines and having powers attached to them rather than being this freeform esoteric idea of a thing. Because let's be clear, every sphere in Mage, the 5 dots broke down to the same 5 things. Dot 1 is awareness of that sphere. Dot 2 is limited interaction with that sphere. Dot 3 is competent interaction with that sphere. Dot 4 was being able to wholly alter that sphere. And dot 5 was complete mastery of that sphere. Every sphere in Mage broke down the same way. Those were the 5 dots. Those were what they meant. And based on your competency in each of those spheres is how much you can manipulate them. An entropy mage with, let's say you had 4 in entropy and 3 in forces, right? Forces being, things like gravity and, wind, fire, lightning, yada, 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 yada. And entropy being the natural intrinsic breakdown and buildup of the relationship between all things. Mm-hmm. So, that same mage could use those spheres at my table at the very least. Just, we're going to fight and the wind is going to blow really hard, knock a brick loose, and it's going to fall down 30 feet and bash the dude's head in that's shooting at me. But those... by definition, it would be slightly more vulgar, but that person could say they're going to go to shoot their gun, the entire gun is going to jam and then blow up in their face. And the sort of nebulous idea of what these effects were is hard for a lot of people to wrap their heads around. And there comes a point as a lover of these games and as someone who is like dutifully like faithful to this set of IPs that we have to give up sometimes the things that maybe we really loved about a thing so that more people can come into the hobby and love it, so that we can have a bigger community and we can have more people we relate to.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is that for dum-dums like me, for dum-dums like me, I need a little bit an easier steppings. I can't get up on that big ladder right now. I need to get on the step stool first, because I'm dumb. And I love, like I said, I love Mage. Huge fan of the lore and the concepts of so many aspects of Mage. I have 4 Mage books sitting on my desktop right now, but I do it the way I want to. I bring it into 5th edition. I just do it the way I want to, because the way that it's written in the book is way too in the ether, man, for me.
Yeah.
All right. So that's Mage. So your second is Vampire.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about what you like from Legacy Vampire.
The thing that I enjoyed the most from Legacy Vampire is always going to be, especially with the added lore of the Beckoning in 5th edition, the ancient lore around the antediluvians and things of that nature, and who they were and what their stories were. I feel like that was one of the few areas of old lore where they really were just we're going to throw our whole stussies at this.
I knew you were gonna say that as well.
And we're gonna make this into exactly what we want to make it. The lore around the Antediluvians really feels like the crux of their creative vision in the old world. And I always love to see a person who's a professional at anything perform at their highest level. I've always said, even if it's somebody who's just a master carpenter, I would sit there and watch them on YouTube make a chair for 8 hours. I love seeing people who are competent in their craft performing at the highest level. It inspires me. It truly lights a fire in me to see people perform their chosen skill at the highest level.
Say something that's gonna be. That's why Avery's running a 5th edition Chronicle finally. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Inspired by me? No, I'm joking.
Yeah.
I'm literally joking.
It is true though.
I'm literally joking. Shut up.
No. I was inspired. I was so inspired by your work in Berlin Bloodlines that I knew I had to do it. But yes, that is my favorite part of the old lore is they made a really solid foundation for the generations of vampires to spring from. And I have to touch that with the caveat of
it's also the Christian lens. Sorry.
I also really loved specifically the lore of Clan Nosferatu. In the old world of darkness,
the narcissistic oh god, now I can't remember. Was it
the Nictuku?
Yeah. Well, what was but what was the name of their antediluvian? I'm blanking on the
Absimilard.
name. Absimilard. That's right.
Yeah. I loved again specifically the Nictuku. That these were the real monsters that dwelt in the shadows, and that the rest of the Nosferatu were just hiding from them. Yeah, you would
see. Back when Outstar and I were on the World of Darkness News together, we used to always talk about Outstar much preferred the Nosferatu that were less grotesque, that had and I'm like, no, I want them slimy and dripping. It was always a conversation that we had constantly.
As you will come to see via Blood of the Covenant, I love my monstrous Nosferatu.
Yes.
I like to make them wildly
and it doesn't make
monsters.
them any less fuckable. Okay.
True. Actually, I think there is a clip floating around on TikTok where where Honey and I really talk about how monstrous we love our Nosferatu.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Sure.
Okay. What don't you like about Legacy lore?
I don't like how many named kindred there are out there that are just disgusting for disgusting's sake. Because I know you've already touched on Mr. Peterson. So I won't harp on that any further.
I hate him. No, please hate him with me. Someone hate him publicly with me.
He's disgusting, and I want to.
And we can't say what he does. You'll have to Google it.
Yeah, if you want to ruin your search history, sure. Yeah. And specifically, my biggest gripe in all of the old disgusting characters is what they did to my girl Sasha Vikos. Which if you haven't read the Siege of Atlanta stuff,
the clan novels, which you can read all about Jan's disgustingness, except don't read them. We're not recommending you read them.
No.
We can read about all the gory details of every disgusting thing Jan and Sasha, maybe not everything Sasha's done, but definitely Jan, all the really, really gross stuff that he is all about.
Yeah, they, it was almost disheartening, especially as a young person. I mean, I read the compilation clan novel when I was 16, and there were some pretty icky things that happened in that one too. Mm-hmm. And I was just like,
the one with the 4 smushed together, that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember reading it and being like, okay, I'm going to take none of that for my game. And to the point, I think that is the mark of a storyteller, in my opinion, not just someone who runs a game. A storyteller sees things in the horizon and being like, that doesn't vibe with what I've got going on, so that doesn't exist. And I would highly encourage anyone thinking about running WOD content, whether 20th anniversary or V5, looking at it and being like, is this integral to the story that I'm running or integral to the mechanics? And if the answer to both of those questions is no, do with it what you want. It doesn't have to be there.
Sorry, I'm just thinking the things I can't say. What is it that you like about 5th edition Vampire that is different from Legacy, for example? I know the easiest answer.
So the cop-out answer for me would be the hunger system.
That's it. Yeah.
That's the cop-out answer.
Look, someone who played the first Chronicle I really played in was with you at 20th edition, and like I didn't spend. I think how many episodes did we do? I never got hungry.
Yeah, we did 15 episodes. Yeah. Which, yeah.
You don't feel the beast hunger at all.
No. It's just kind of this implied thing.
It's blood accounting.
Yeah. And but I think the real answer of what I like the most about 5th edition is that 5th edition has an entirely different feel. When you play older editions of Vampire, things feel a little bit more concrete, a little bit more static. Feels like things don't often change. And so when you look at, like the pre-written stuff for Chicago, where they're like, hey, the prince is gonna die, and this is, a big deal, this doesn't happen often. I'm like, then what's the point? If their nights are long and boring all the time, which, let's be clear, that's the reason you take time gaps in a vampire game, because sometimes that is their nature, is to be these static creatures. But when every time you're sitting down at the table, you're like, all right, guys, let's go to Elysium and roll 58,000 dice on social combat. It's just the same thing again and again and again and again and again. And V5 is so masterful between putting in the predator types and the hunger and changing the kindred political sphere.
Touchstones was also brought up as well.
Touchstone, yes. Yes. Having something to tie you to your humanity is such a big deal. And again, that still focuses kind of into what I'm saying with it. Just all of it just feels different, and if it feels more real, it feels like trying to navigate between being a monster and salvaging whatever you have left of your humanity. And in that regard, every night for a kindred in 5th edition could be different than the last. And while maintaining this view of stasis. And I think that's so important. It creates much more dynamic stories. And I'm going to be real with you. I think there is a huge reason why, when Twitch first became a thing and when streaming first became a thing, that it took several years, in my opinion, until V5 came out, for people to look at WOD as a potential actual play system. Because I gotta be honest, V20 stories were boring. If you weren't into high political drama, high octane, like lies, deceit, and betrayal, if you didn't watch Game of Thrones for the Cersei episodes, it wasn't for you. And so I think that's why with the advent of 5th edition, I think that's why we've seen even now V20 stories being told in an actual play scenario, because I think even if the V20 storytellers aren't consciously recognizing it, I feel like we all kind of realize that it would have been very boring to watch a vampire story for somebody not at the table in older editions.
I love how spicy you're being right now. These
I gotta
spicy takes. I can't be anyone but myself. No, it's
I
perfect.
can't be anyone but myself.
I literally couldn't agree with you. You know, it's kind of annoying actually, because you're taking all the things that I would say, just saying it instead, which is fine.
Rough.
Yeah, you know, what are you gonna do about it? No, yeah, I completely agree. And your game wasn't boring. I'm gonna say that, but the difference is that you were running Transylvania, the Transylvania Chronicles. So you're running sort of a set thing where stuff does happen because things do move, because time's moving and historical events are happening. That's a little different than playing a 20th anniversary that's set in the 90s that takes place in Chicago and not a whole lot changes, right? Yeah. Unless you're running a Week of Nightmares game, I guess.
Sure.
So yeah, that's my exact answer. That's everything that I love about 5th edition, that takes place such a street level, modern nights. Everything feels much, and it's much more, it's just much easier to play the vampire and the hunger. The hunger is so important. It's so important for the storyteller. It's so interesting for the player. And yeah, makes for great content for people to watch. So yeah, right on all points, you jerk. So what don't you like about 5th edition?
It kind of falls into the same vein sometimes, is that I sometimes feel like there's maybe an simplification of things. Like I feel like the antagonists for the vampires outside of the Second Inquisition, which I feel, again, I feel the need to tout for a moment. The work that was done for the Second Inquisition going into V5 is some of the best narrative framework I've seen in a very long time in a TTRPG. And I read a lot of TTRPG books, and I'm very invested in the TTRPG community as a whole. And I still think the narrative framework of the Second Inquisition might be the best narrative framework I've seen in the last decade. It's gorgeous. I have no notes.
But what do you have notes about, Avery?
I have notes about what got done with the other antagonists. I mean, I got to be real, kind of until the Sabbat source book came out, I was a little underwhelmed there, and I'm still a little underwhelmed. It felt very oversimplified. I know the lore that, you know, they were mostly destroyed because they were the ones who were out and about and weren't hiding anything, and like, I get it. It all follows a logical progression, but I think I would still like a little bit more of a backbone for having cults of the Sabbat as an antagonist.
You know what the problem is we've talked about this privately all too much. So like, my answer is that too. My answer is, what I don't like about 5th edition Vampire is there's a lot less lore, and not that I need a ton of lore, but as you said, an oversimplification where I think there's some idea that maybe like not everybody wants like big, and of course not, they don't want big text lore, but there are people who do, and at this point there's been enough books that have come out where you kind of just want a lore book at this point, right?
Yeah.
For example. But second to that is, yes, I think the Sabbat, where they were in the old books, always pissed me off, because I'm like, what do you mean, Archbishop? What do you mean you're controlling cities? Like, are you the Camarilla? What are you doing? You know, you're like, you have a whole point of like Gehenna and the Dark Father, and you have this whole point to you. What are you doing setting up cities?
Sure.
Like, you're, you know, I always looked at them akin to like the people who are like, the end is nigh, the end is nigh. What are you wasting time doing that if you really believe it? Then you don't really believe it. So that also causes like a, you know, a problem within the sect itself, like what is the word I'm looking for? An ideological problem. So I understand why then breaking it down, but I think they broke it down too far. I think there should be, and I'm not going to pretend like I know what it is, because whatever, but there should be some middle ground between Archbishop and basically Camarilla, but like dark Camarilla, like Dark Phoenix, like dark Camarilla, and just, you know, no clans, no nothing. We're Sabbat and we have no other identity. There should be, you could take some elements of both, but there should have been some middle ground there.
Yeah. And on that same regard, talking about potential enemies, they did a lot in Cults of the Blood Gods to establish, these dangerous vampire cults.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I would have and I know that I'm working on it for my own projects, but I would have liked them to maybe see a little bit more emphasis on the danger of these cults within the Camarilla and the Anarch movements. Because, and I will say it with direct eye contact to the camera, a cult is always dangerous. There's no such thing as a good cult.
Correct.
So
can confirm.
With the advent of Cults of the Blood Gods, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more emphasis on the idea that, hey, if you want to play Cult of Mithras, you need to realize that you're going to be a big old bastard for the rest of your players.
Yes, and that goes for the Thin Bloods, even the Ashfinders. That goes for them too.
Yeah, absolutely. Any cult is dangerous, and so, I'll speak this out into existence. One of the ideas that I have for a chronicle down the line is I want to run a Thin Blood chronicle where they are fighting an internal war against the Ashfinders, trying to take a foothold in the city. Because these things are important. Telling these stories about fighting back against these cults is super important to the narrative, and I would love to see more of that content floating around.
And I know I saw Luna in here before. I don't know if Luna's still in here, but the Baharis are called too, Luna. I'm so sorry. I know you know that, but like...
Oh, Rissa's in here too. We gotta apologize. I'm so sorry. They're bad. They're
really,
bad.
They're really a cult, like in VTM. They're really a cult. They do bad things. Let's all cast our eyes back to the Berlin Bloodlines episode that broke all of my players. When I put that forth of... When I'm like, oh, we're gonna go to a Bahari party? Well, then I'll show them a Bahari party.
I'll show you a party.
I'm like I was raised in a cult. I could do this, no problem. And then I forgot everyone else at the table wasn't. So it's fine. It's fine. It all worked out. Wraith. What is it that you like about Wraith? Or I'm sorry, excuse me, Werewolf. Werewolf came next for you. Werewolf.
The thing that I like the
Legacy
most about Legacy Werewolf was the depth that they gave us and the immense detail that they gave us on the spirits. There were entire supplements just about spirits and their powers and where they ranged and what they were doing and what their core ideologies were. And in a game where the metaphysical framework is that the spirits are extensions of Gaia's will and all of this stuff, and these intensely spiritual creatures that werewolves are, getting into the depth of those spirits is, in my opinion, so important. I could sit here for hours and go over the notes that I've done about the spirits that I want to bring into a werewolf game that I'm cooking up. And I mean, there's one spirit, the main Karen spirit, that I've written 3 pages of description for myself to keep reminding myself to keep me honest about what this spirit is and what it's about. And that was kind of baked into the Legacy Werewolf, and I think that was such a good choice for them, rather than leave it nebulous and kind of freeform.
I'm gonna be super brave and say something, and I really need you to listen to my words when I say this thing that I'm gonna say.
All right.
The thing I like and don't like about Legacy Werewolf is the same thing. Kinfolk. I really love the concept of kinfolk. We have used it in our W5 game. Okay. And we love the idea of werewolves with families, who love their children. However, the problem with that inherently, if you aren't playing with people who aren't terrible, you have people who abuse that concept. And if anyone was paying attention in Of Bane and Blood, I did include a character who was absolutely using the mindset of Legacy of just breeding for breeding's sake, which was Timber's father. Oh God, I'm blanking on his name. Crookpaw, thank you. It was Crookpaw, who was just going out as a wolf and breeding with other wolves, which is gross, and those wolves cannot consent. It's gross and weird, and I did that on purpose to try. And he's a terrible father and not a very good character, and I did that on purpose to show that is the wrong way to do it. Whereas Maggie and Sweets were people who loved their children and had their children, they wanted them, and they loved each other. And I showed that relationship much differently than Crookpaw, who just basically hit it and quit it and left the kids behind.
Yeah, so, he did many leggers.
Yeah, so that's my answer to the werewolf. But I want you to hear what you don't like about Legacy Werewolf if we have the time.
What I don't like about Legacy Werewolf, it boils down to a very simple and easy statement: is that Werewolf in its Legacy edition encouraged the male violent power fantasy and did nothing to detract from it. Even with the idea of putting in these hyper feminists, Black Furies, that was very, very damaging to the movement of feminism. It did too much to encourage senseless violence for the sake of senseless violence. You know, werewolf culture, they were like, don't eat humans, but I mean, we also don't give a shit really if you kill them. Like really the only people that cared were the bone.
Like, haha, he's not going home to his kids. Sorry.
Yeah, like, really the only people that cared were usually the children of Gaia and the Bonars. Like, sometimes you would get a softy stargazer who would care, but like most of the time it was just like, oh, you killed a human. What is it, Tuesday? You know, like, and when you provide such small areas for repercussions for violence, you are essentially encouraging it, and that's all I really have to say about that.
Okay, so Werewolf 5th edition. What I like about Werewolf 5th edition and what I don't like about Werewolf 5th edition is the same answer again. Ready? My answer is, I like that they didn't have it as a continuation to W20, and I also don't like that they didn't have it as a continuation to W20. I like it because it is stripped down to, for the most part, although strange things like having Jonas Albrecht on the cover of Shattered Nation is weird because he's from Legacy, so that was a weird decision in my opinion. But in general, I like the idea of having everything stripped away and everything anew, and you can take that book as a standalone book and you don't need to know anything else. I like that as a person, me, who's never run Werewolf before. Love that. At the same time, I am well versed in the lore of all of these different splats, and I was bummed that I couldn't take a lot of things or connect a lot of things easily to run my own game. I needed to recruit Avery here to help me bridge the gaps in W20 and W5. I think we did the best that we could together, in order so that Of Bane and Blood absolutely is part of the Legacy lore, just like Berlin Bloodlines is part of the we include the Legacy lore, because we didn't want it to be, we wanted those things because there are some things that we like, as we are discussing now. So that's my answer again for Werewolf, same as the first time. Sorry.
Yeah, this is one of those occasions where I also have to say the thing that I like the most is, in one regard, is the thing I like the least, in another regard, and it is, again, the I feel like the lack of investiture in the antagonists of your werewolves. I will be the first to tell you that you shouldn't, if you value your mental health, you should never read the Book of Fomor from Legacy Edition. it will scar you and you'll have dreams about it. And I say this as someone who has read the book several times. Please don't. But on the same token, it would be nice to have a little bit more baked in framework that is more than a couple of stat blocks in the back of the book. However, on that same regard, if you're feeling particularly cheeky as a storyteller, write your own, and you can take as much as you like from Legacy or not. You could decide that you wanted to take the Black Spiral Dancers in a whole new direction, and you would be free to do that. You could talk about, I'm going to create a faction of werewolves that's like the Black Spiral Dancers, but they serve the Weaver, and you could essentially do that, and there's nothing prohibiting you from that. So I think in that same regard, I love that they have put very little work into the antagonists, but I would like just a little crumb.
If it's not obvious, we're very greedy. We want more. And they don't give us enough. We want more. A bunch of fat kids at the end of a chocolate conveyor belt.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me write some stuff for you guys. All right. All right.
All right. Okay. So there's Werewolf. It's harder for me to remember your list than my own list. What was next? Wraith, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because you changeling was last. So Wraith. What do you like about Wraith? And what do you not like about Wraith?
For Legacy,
Well, there's only Legacy, and we'll talk about why there isn't 5th Wraith in a minute.
The thing that I like the most is, and which I already touched on it earlier, is that interconnectivity with your other players. It built such a unique table culture that the person to your right was playing your, shadow, and they had to know your character almost as well as you did, and it made a very interesting table culture that established things like consent and interplayer like pre-session talks, and I loved that was a beautiful thing. My first time I ran Wraith, I had 5 players that had never met outside the table, and we walked away from that story, and all of us are friends going on 10 years now. And we still talk every day, even though we live, states away from each other, and we still talk and we still reminisce about that game because we did something important there. And we did something a little bit ahead of its time. The thing that I like the least about Wraith is the power structure and the seemingly static things in the Shadowlands. It never made any sense to me. How are you gonna have a city when there's a maelstrom going around eating everything? Like, I don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're gonna. Okay, we're gonna speed run because I can talk about Wraith forever, and I won't. Okay. What I love about Wraith, the whole concept of Wraith. I love the lore of Wraith. I love how you're dead, right? And wait, come on. Tone down. You're dead, and everything is worse than you could have ever imagined in your living in the Skinlands, right? As one of the quick. Fucking love Wraith. It's worse than you could ever imagine, right? If it's not the hierarchy, which I agree, but get rid of them. If it's not the hierarchy, if it's not the maelstrom, if it's not Oblivion itself, if it's not your shadow, if it's not fucking other ghosts that will kill you, if it's not fucking reapers that want to turn you into material in Stygia, it's like, you're dead, and like, where's the hope? Wraith is about a game of hope, and that's what I like about it so much. Because it's nice to have a beacon of something to shoot towards, transcendence, when you're as dark inside as me and you want everything to be that dark all the time. What I don't like about Wraith, the hierarchy, that's great. I don't love it. Oh man, I'm having such a brain issue today. The guy across the river Styx, come on, what's in lore? What's
Chiron.
Chiron, thank you. Chiron being the leader of Stygia. I think that changed in the like one of the last 20th books they released. But you know, being the leader and like, you know, all of these different like guilds and stuff. I mean, yes, okay, but that would need to be stripped away and changed. I don't love that. Another thing I don't love the shadow player thing. I think that could just lead to, in the same way that kinfolk is my answer of not loving things about Werewolf, I can just see that going really wrong. I can just see that being a deterrent to getting people to play. Got to get rid of that. Lastly, thing I don't like about Wraith, sorry, is I do not like the lore of the Maelstroms. I like some of it. Some of it's fine. Some of it's normal and fine. Some of it is very, 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 very insensitive in the way that it is done. Go back and read them. A lot of them are in Black Dog, so don't actually. But some of them are really poorly done. In the same way that there are really poorly done vampire books like Berlin by Night. Don't ever read it. Don't ever read it. Only if you want to have a really bad time. Just don't read the clan novels. Only if you want to have a really bad time, right? Don't
read Montreal by Night unless you want to have a horrible time.
I don't actually know any mage books that are like you know, like Secrets of the Worm is a book where you're gonna have a bad time reading it. Yeah. Like, read it if you want to, but you're gonna have a bad time reading it. But like, I don't know any bad mage books actually. I don't have enough mage books.
I have one on my shelf.
There has to be technocracy books that are bad.
Oh yeah, that one's one, and there's also one about oh, it's on my shelf. I can't see it from here, but it's the source book that's about the metaphysical cosmology is about like the strongholds in the Umbra.
God, pass. Okay.
And the third section of that book is entirely devoted to how to create an Ephantine labyrinth. And it's disgusting. It's really bad. Yeah. Like there's some shit in there that made my skin crawl.
Yeah. Some of the clan novels, Whitney, the best clan novel, and the only one I would ever recommend you to read is Hesha's clan novel, The Ministry, or I think Follower Set back then, Follower Set clan novel, because 1, Hesha's hot, 2, he's smart, 3, he fucks. I love Hesha. Great character. Falls in love. It's a love story. Somewhere in the 13 books, one of the writers was like, can I write a love story? And I think someone said yes. And it's just a love story where he falls in love with an antiquarian. And it's the best one. It's the only one I would recommend you reading. And even if you don't know what else is going on. Anyway. Yes. Why do you think that there is no Wraith 5th edition? At the moment.
I'm honestly not sure. I think a part of me says it has to be something like legal. Because like, no, it's not IP domain control or anything like that.
Paradox owns it.
Oh, shit.
Paradox Interactive owns Wraith. There was an Orpheus app thing. There's Wraith the Oblivion VR game.
Oh, that's right, the VR game.
Yeah.
Well, then I don't really know, because I feel like, and maybe this speaks a little too much to the nihilism of the younger adults that we have coming up. I think that commercially it would do very well with the current climate of players playing games. I think it would do extremely well.
The VR game did really, really well. But here's the difference between a VR game and a tabletop game. In the same way that like Baldur's Gate does really, really well. And I know D&D, a tabletop game, does really, really well. But, you take someone from Baldur's Gate and you put them in a D&D game and they go like, well, this is how this works in Baldur's Gate. Like the famous one is like guidance, right? And everyone goes like, well, you can't just be like running around casting guidance on each other before you say anything to anybody. They're like, well, you can do that in Baldur's Gate. The difference is that there's the buffer of a video game which as I said, did Wraith the Oblivion Afterlife did really well. The difference is the buffer of a video game. You're sitting at a table and you're playing a dead person. You're playing a ghost who is in, let's call it purgatory. Let's use real life terms. He essentially is in perdition, in purgatory forever. And there's no, and like the idea of getting out and transcendence is a nebulous idea. It's an esoteric idea. It's nothing concrete. That's part of the journey of Wraith, is figuring out if you even can get out of there, settling your fetters and blah, 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 all that stuff. So I think that is a super hard... It might not be a hard concept on the surface, people, but to agree to play that game, you have to really be okay.
You have to want it.
Because we're all mortal and we will all die. I know it. I hate to break it to you, Avery. We're all going to die.
I don't know. I might live forever. We'll see.
I do. I know. You seem like a person who'll be like, I haven't died yet, so like you can't prove I'm gonna die yet. I'm an organic being. So that's much harder. Whereas vampire, you're died, but you came back.
Yeah.
But there's no going back with Wraith. You're dead.
Yeah. It's certainly an exercise in being honest with yourself, because if you're not in a mental health great place, it's certainly not the game for you.
Yeah, it's got to be the darkest game ever released by World of Darkness system, and like everything around it, you have to be really okay, and that's hard. That's hard to pitch to people who's never played it. Mm-hmm. It's got to be a difficult pitch, honestly. So I think that is probably the reason it's not in fifth.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
All right. Avery's favorite changeling.
So my favorite thing about changeling,
I like the cover. It's pretty.
It's the lore of the Lost. It's not even to do with the dreaming.
I understand, but we're talking about dreaming. We're not talking about Chronicles. We're talking about
dreaming. If we're talking about the dreaming, then I would have to say that it's the mechanic work. It's the mechanic framework of the dreaming that I really liked. Because
dreaming, the Farge, how it's all like, and the trods, the way that they do that, or you mean like literal mechanics of the book that when you run the game?
Both actually. Okay. The mechanic of the dreaming, unlike the blood accounting that we were talking about with Legacy Vampire, having glamour in your system, it had gravitas in the dreaming's mechanic. Like you could feel it. It wasn't just this nebulous box that you could tick. You know, there were consequences, and you know, if you ran out of glamour, then you wouldn't be able to access your famine, and you know, they did a good job in making up for how little the amount of blood in your system mattered in Legacy Vampire by making your glamour really, really, really have an impact on the game. And the harvesting of that glamour having a huge impact on who you are as a changeling.
Correct.
I think, if I'm being honest, I can see a direct relationship between them realizing that and putting the hunger system into 5th edition, if I'm being real. Because they feel very similar.
For sure.
It feels like a very similar process.
For sure.
So that's my favorite thing. My least favorite thing about the dreaming
is it's not the Lost.
No. Is that in the same way that there were really disgusting characters baked into Legacy Vampire, there were also really disgusting characters baked into Legacy Changeling.
Yeah, for sure.
And
I don't like King David. I said it. Sorry, guys.
What made it slightly worse is that a lot of those baked-in characters that were really icky with Changeling, they were doing very icky things to children. And anybody who knows me knows that that's a hard line at any table for me. That is where I will be like, hey, take a step back. This is not okay. You need to evaluate the decisions that brought you to this place.
Yeah, it is very much. It is well known if you play in a Huddy game that Huddy's hard lines are 3 things: no harm to children, harm to pets limited, and no sexual assault. Those are my hard 3 lines. They never change. And no harm to children does not mean children do not appear ever in a Huddy game. But everyone should know at the table, if a child appears, they have ultimate plot armor. Nothing bad will happen to them, and if you try and do anything bad to them, you will die.
Yeah, and you touched on the other one that they touched on a lot with the icky baked in characters. Is there's a lot of sexual assault with the icky baked in characters in Changeling, and that always made me sick to my stomach.
Yes, and it gets weird and gross because there's a different mindset, like, because the changelings age in a different way, and you can be like in an adult body with a childling mind, and that can get really weird too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. It's not good.
No. No, that's super fair. My thing I love about the changing is I broke something. Huh, weird. I'll find out what that is later. Don't know. I'll figure out what that is later. Probably from waving my hands around too much. What I don't like about, or what I do like about changeling rather, is I love the concept of the chrysalis. I don't know why. I love this I think it's different. It's sort of werewolf inspired, and I've always been that person who reads between the lines in the lore books. And I've said it a few times in Of Bane and Blood that changelings and werewolves are related. Fairies and Garu are related in some way, created in some way that are similar because they are written so similarly in the books. And in both Werewolf 20th and Changeling 20th, they both talk about each other like they are related. Back in the day, the Heart Wardens, what they used to be called, would talk about changelings like they were cousins. And it drives me crazy.
Yeah, well, I mean, the lore there is that they were changelings at one point who just decided to cast off the dreaming.
Garu.
Yeah.
Yeah, which calls into question Gaia, right? Which calls that whole thing into question, but whatever. So I love the chrysalis. I love the idea where it's a little bit kind of unique. Because there's no one choosing you, right? It's a reincarnated fairy soul. So like it's less Gaia choosing you, and it's less a sire choosing you, and it's less that you just happen to die because you're a human being, or you happen to just be super special because you're a mage, or awakened person. This is sort of a real lottery. This is a real lottery because it's infamous in the lore that like there aren't many changelings left. Because they did this ritual, and there's no guarantee that you are going to, especially in the world being pounded down with banality over and over again, there's very little chance, and it gets littler as every generation passes, that you are going to reincarnate.
Yeah.
And I love that concept, and especially in the modern day that we live in now in 2025, it seems more pertinent than ever how rare changelings are.
Yeah.
So that brings into what I don't like about changeling is one, I don't like all of the names for everything because they are culturally appropriating those names. I've never ever liked that. And that's a huge issue for me. I don't like the different age stages of the changelings, as I've already mentioned. Like, I think Grump is the last one, which is like the old guy persona.
Yeah.
I don't like that. I don't like that you can switch around in them depending on how much time you spend in or out of the dreaming, or how much glamour you infuse in yourself, that you can sort of like de-age yourself. I don't like any of those concepts for the same reason that I both like and don't like kinfolk and all the other stuff we talked about, because they can be manipulated and used by bad people. Will there always be bad people who run these games? Yes, but we don't need to give them more tools.
Sure.
When they can so easily be changed or removed to make it impossible for them to run. Now, why do you think Changeling 5th isn't in... there is no Changeling 5th yet?
Well, I honestly don't have a good answer for that. Other than there are things that took priority. Changeling, as much as those of us who enjoyed it, which I again, let me be clear, was not me. As much for those of you who did enjoy it.
Avery hates Changeling. Just kidding.
I think that looking at things through a business aspect, I am intimately familiar with the fact that Changeling commercially did the least, other than the aforementioned splat that we don't talk about. The two splats we don't talk about.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fair enough point. I also think that Changeling is so outside of the world of darkness, it's so hard to grasp why. I think you need someone to sit down and explain Changeling to you of why it belongs in the world of darkness, because on the surface it doesn't seem like it belongs. We're talking about fucking fairies, right? But again, when you start talking about the concept and idea of glamour and banality, and how, the world we live in now, where artists I'm not an artist, but I'm sure many artists feel like, what's the point when if I try and put anything where people can see my work, it's just going to be taken and used by an AI engine to teach itself how to steal my stuff. And that right there is a perfect concept of changeling, where it is removing wonder and creativity from the world and turning it more gray and banal. And once you get that, and to the point where if there are no more, and this is important, if there are no more changelings in the world, we can't dream. Like, we human beings can't dream because they're in it, and it will be closed off to everybody.
Yeah.
But nobody knows.
Nobody knows that. I don't even think most of the changelings know that.
No, they don't. They don't.
That's a deep cut. That's a real deep cut.
They don't, because that's sort of, again, one of those concepts that they can discover. Because, again, another aspect of changeling is discovering who you were.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And that's just hard to people to wrap their heads around. You have to sit down. I mean, when you have to sit down and explain to someone the concept of something in such detail and such like philosophical ideas, then you might be losing the plot a little bit. Like, you might be losing an audience that will buy your books.
Sure.
Whoopsie dipsy. So the remaining release order would be based on past commercial success? I mean, no, I don't think so. I think that's just a fair enough point from the outside, but Hunter the Reckoning was the second released after Vampire the Masquerade, and they didn't even get a 20th anniversary edition, so I don't think we can really say that.
No. I mean, from the knowledge that I have, and from knowing the people that I know in the community, I think Hunter the Reckoning, the old Hunter the Reckoning, was probably the third least bought. I think more people bought Changeling than bought Hunter back in the day.
Yeah, Hunter was one of the least selling old world games.
I think to the point of what we could speculate on, I would speculate on the fact that the things that lend themselves tonally to what they want to do with the 5th edition World of Darkness is what I would anticipate being the release schedule.
Yeah.
Saying release schedule feels like kind of facetious, but I would anticipate the next splat being whatever lends itself best to the story that they want to continue telling, expanding the world of 5th edition.
Yeah, and I could say, as someone who works with the World of Darkness team, is they spend a lot of their time trying to, give what the community wants, and they take their time and they try and make the best products as possible or come up with the best concepts as possible. So I'm sorry, patience is just required. I'm sorry, it just is. It's just the way it is. Now, speaking of legacy and 5th, let's talk about bridging gaps, because I've done it and you helped me do it for Werewolf. Mm-hmm. I had already been doing it for Vampire. So let's talk about why, and you are also doing it for Blood of the Covenant, or is that a spoiler?
No, I don't think it's a spoiler at all.
Why don't you talk a little bit about why we do that instead of just forgetting the legacy and just playing 5th and nothing else?
I mean, for me personally, the impetus for that is that I made so many memories, and I made so many important realizations in my own life outside of the game from things that I realized about the lore of, old WoD, and I felt like it was important for me to honor my roots as a storyteller. More than anything, is that I wanted to take all of the potential that the old World of Darkness had, leave the things that frankly at times disgusted me behind, and keep it going in this world that I very much believed in and very much still believe in, which is the lens of 5th edition. I think that the lens of 5th edition is a beautifully dark insight into the human condition, and I wanted to keep supporting it with the things that I enjoyed and that I felt like supported the narrative. And as always with telling a story, you always have to keep tone in mind. So were there things that I liked about the Old World of Darkness that I cut away because they didn't fit the tone? Absolutely. But I wanted to keep supporting that tone and keep rooting it down to this street level kind of story, and this story about the lives of these creatures and or rather unlives when it comes to vampire, and keep rooting it down and keep rooting it down and stay within the tone, because I think the tone of 5th edition was the best thing to happen to WoD since they released Vampire 1st edition.
No, and that's perfectly said. Is exactly keeping it more personal horror. Keeping what you like from Legacy, what fits the tone of the theme of the game that you're running, but keep pulling it into the personal horror, into the characters, into the players' backgrounds. That's absolutely perfectly said, and I could not agree more. It's exactly what I would say. Why I do what I do with Vampire, but you were instrumental in helping me with Werewolf, because Werewolf, out of all the splats, is probably the one I engaged with the least. It's the one I enjoyed the least, as I already said. So why don't you talk a little bit more about moon bridges, the things that you recommended to me bringing into our Werewolf game that was so vital.
Sure. So when Huddy and I started talking about the vision of this Werewolf game and what we could use and what would further support the narrative, there were, I believe, 4 things that initially came to mind. The first one was that I wanted to show the transition of the Get of Fenris to the Cult of Fenris. Because I feel like that was something that a lot of lore people were kind of like, hey, what happened here? This maybe seems a little out of the blue. And I feel like, and please take no offense to this if you're one of the people that did feel like it was out of the blue, but I very much felt like the writing was on the wall. And I wanted to take that writing off the wall and put it on the page, to continue the metaphor. I wanted to show the danger of letting a sub-society that is solely fueled by strength and rage and brutality, and that is a sickness on the human soul. And well, in this case, the werewolf soul. I wanted to illustrate that because I feel like it is a point that kind of hides between the lines in history books. And I wanted to make a very clear and plain statement, and I think Huddy wanted to do that as well. The second thing that came to mind was the moon bridges, because in my opinion, that is the greatest tragedy of the fall of the old world.
Avery was very insistent on the moon, which I was not insistent on the moon bridges. Avery was, so I said, you know what, I'm gonna Avery took the moment to do a monologue about the moon bridges, and that sort of is what pushed me over to being like, all right, I'll do some more with the moon bridges.
Because they were such, with the tone that Werewolf 5 offers, that the Cairns and the Septs are now isolated and is now fighting a losing battle for the ground that we have, and trying to take the fight to the worm when we can, but if we don't have a home to return to, what's the fight even about? I was trying to square a circle in my mind of how that could have occurred, if the moon bridges were still up, and the logical draw there was it would have never happened. In the old world of darkness, if a sept was being attacked, or if they had any inclination that a sept was being attacked, you would send out your silent striders to go notify all these other cairns, and they would come back with an army of Garu at their back. That's the way it worked. There was, as the new supplement was called Shattered Nation for a reason. And I think the thing that shattered the nation, in my opinion, was the fall of the moon bridges. It had to be that. There was no other way for me personally to square that circle. Because even if it was a city sept, if the messengers of these septs went to, an ancestral red talon cairn out in the middle of Siberia, and they were like, hey, this is happening at this cairn, it's heavily implied in the old lore that would there be some discussion about it amongst those red towns? Yes, but 9 times out of 10 would they come across that moon bridge into New York City and help fight off those black spiral dancers? They would, because it is a place of power for Gaia. And so I really, really wanted to push that the greatest failing of the old Garu nation was allowing the moon bridges to fall and not protecting them to the last breath. Because that it was the heart and soul of the Garu cultures. When one wolf howled, all wolves came. So to square that circle, we had to do a little bit of work there. The third thing that I brought up, Toddy, was the Stargazers and Chimera. And I will never forget the look on Huddy's face. Like I just spit on her shoes when I brought it up. But
that's not the look.
They having them walk away from the Garu nation in the end, in the what I like to call the final throes of 20th anniversary. It seemed like the framework around it was all the rest of the Garu kind of wrote it off. They were like, oh yeah, we didn't need them anyway.
Yeah.
When there was a very certain amount of spiritual balance that Chimera and the Stargazers held within the Garu community.
I was surprised how prickly Avery was about the Stargazers' very blurb write-up in W5. But again, we have to remember because it's a reboot, right? So yeah. I understand. I get why that was a point that you really... It was nothing I could really do about it because I had no idea. I still have no idea what I'm gonna do something with it, but I don't know what yet because we don't know.
No. And then the unfortunate bit about that is the rest of squaring the circle that is the Stargazers relies upon we would have to cut away some of the legacy lore for them because when they walk away from the Garu Nation, they go to the Lamplight Courts and the Hengeyokai, which is
Hengeyokai, yeah.
Bad.
That's before you get to your first point. Ugly, bad, good. Why do you think we decided to reboot W5 in the end? Exactly for the reasons that Avery was just saying. Stuff with Hengeyokai and what was the one with an M, the shark, the Makola.
Rokia was the sharks.
Rokia.
Makole were the dinosaur lizard dragon.
Right. For exactly that reason. I don't know this on any sort of personal level. I don't have anything to do with the books. Nothing to do with it. Sometimes they let me proofread them, but that's it. Or play test them. But I have nothing to do with the writing or the concept creation, nothing like that. I think that the idea of bridging, especially with so much in Werewolf that is problematic, when it comes to the names of indigenous, names that belong to indigenous tribes, very problematic old lore, and just concepts that fit in the 90s, but just do not fit in the 2020s. I think it was just overwhelming amount that they decided they needed to reboot rather than try and bridge is what I think happened, but I have no insider knowledge of that at all, but I think that's what it is.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with those points. I wouldn't have tried to fully bridge that gap. Were I the people writing that game. There's too much sickness around the core. And then the fourth and final point that I brought up to Huddy, with bridging the gap with Werewolf, really centered around, I felt that focusing in on the Garu being kind of estranged from the Umbra now, when the Umbra had such depth in previous editions of Werewolf, and focusing on how foreign and now hostile the Umbra is to the Garu. Whereas in older editions of Werewolf, I think the exact quote from the 20th edition Werewolf book is that the Garou felt, quote, that the Umbra was their true home.
Yes, and I think that that's one of the hardest. That's another really hard thing that you had coming into OW5 was the Spirit Wilds, where everything was so where you couldn't just like traverse through the Umbra, where the Umbra was as dangerous or more dangerous rather than being in on the other side of the gauntlet.
Yeah, and I had played a lot of old Werewolf. Admittedly, the only other splat that came close to the amount of time that I put into playing old Werewolf was Vampire. And I say that in having ran a 3-year-long Mage campaign. But Werewolf moving into 5th and being estranged from the Umbra really shocked me when I first picked up the book. I was like, whoa. They are really turning a tonal page here. They want the Garou to not be sure if Gaia loves them anymore. This is big. This is huge. The narrative implications here are massive, and I have to admit, to my own discredit, I received it very prickly at first, and I didn't like it, and I got some hurt feelings about it. But again, at Huddy's behest, I went back and I read a lot of those things, and I read it with fresh eyes, and I said, no, I have to let go of some of these feelings that I have about the way things were. And I think narratively, it tells a very important story now that and it's not on the surface. It's completely up to your storyteller to portray the narrative of now the Umbra is dangerous to you. But it is an important narrative, in my opinion, to tell that it's not just the worm out of balance anymore. The wild is out of balance. The weaver is out of balance. Everything is reaching its apex state of crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that was the fourth big point that I was like, we should push this narrative. We should make going across the gauntlet dangerous, and we should do it in a way that is starkly contrasting to going back to flashbacks with Sense of Sweetwater of going to a cairn in the Umbra and it just being cool and everybody's chilling. And,
unfortunately, we didn't get to do any trips in the Umbra, but we will. Don't worry about it. All right, so we need to wrap this little live stream up because if you can't tell, I keep shifting around because my back's been bothering me today, and I need to stand up. Sitting too much. So we're gonna wrap this up. We talked about why we bridge, what we like and what we don't like about 5th edition. If you enjoyed this little live stream, us talking about World of Darkness, if you wanna, this is for anyone in the comments or the live chat right now. If you wanna hear Avery yap, as you can tell, I thought I was a yapper, but Avery's yapper more than I am. If you want to hear us yap about World of Darkness stuff, specific World of Darkness stuff, specific topics, leave it in the comments, and maybe I'll do this again. Maybe I'll snatch Avery again, do this, over there on the other side of the world from me.
Yeah.
But before we go, I do want to mention, or I do want to talk one thing. I want to make a soft announcement. Very soft, very gentle to you.
Very mindful, very demure.
Very mindful, very soft. I'd like to a soft launch, which is already something that goes around. A lot of people who watch my games or people who play in my games and on social media, they talk about the Huddyverse, which are my games. All my games exist in the same universe. And I would like to actually soft launch, the Huddyverse. In the sense where I want to tell more stories in the World of Darkness, but I'm just one me. I can't do it all by myself. I only have one life, and I'm spending a lot of it doing this, and I can only handle so much because I'm only one me. So I'd like to start bringing in new people into my channel rather, and telling games in my universe. And I can't think of anyone who knows my universe better than someone who's been in it a lot, Avery. And so, Avery, would you like to talk about what it is that I proposed to you to bring you into the Huddyverse?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very excited. Anyone who knows me personally knows that I'm such a history geek. And not just the war guy. I'm not a war guy. Let me be very clear. I'm
What's your
not a
favorite
war
war?
guy. Oh God, I'm gonna kill myself. Anyway, I'm a big history buff, and I really love digging deep and doing deep cuts and making commentary on certain historical periods through the lens of the World of Darkness. And so I'm very excited to say that coming soon in the future, I'll be working on an audio drama style game where we get into the final nights of Constantinople in a V5 game. So bridging the gap between Dark Ages Vampire and playing 5th edition. And again, seeing me again squaring a circle.
It's a big undertaking that I'm asking of Avery. I brought the proposition, I brought the fall of Constantinople, I brought the idea of fifth Dark Ages, and I said, I will be your player. Let's work on this together. Let me bring you into the Huddyverse. And Avery will be telling stories within my canon of things, doing Dark Ages, but also in the future, maybe doing other things, whatever they want to do. As long as it's approved by me. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I need to check the canon lore. I am the lore holder over here. But other than that, it's a sort of the soft launch thing that I want to do. I'm sure in the future I'll be bringing in more storytellers to be able to tell even more stories, because I love the World of Darkness with all my heart. It's the absolute, it means everything to me. It's changed my entire life. I wouldn't know Avery without it. I wouldn't have the job that I do. I wouldn't be talking to you beautiful people here this evening without it. It means everything to me, and all I want to do is put more content out that shows off these games and what they can be, so that you can take it and you can, play your own games, take inspiration from it, or just giggle at me being a goof on screen. Whatever it is that you get enjoyment out of it, is so important to me. And especially to Brillchan in the chat, and to Ugly Bad Good, who has consistently been praising the Werewolf game both in the comments and in this live chat. It means a whole lot to me, and Avery can attest that I do not have good feelings about how I did the Werewolf. I think I did a very bad job storytelling my first Werewolf game. I have endlessly berated myself in front of Avery and my players, and it means a lot to see that you enjoyed it as much as you did. Shut up, Avery. I can hear your thoughts. Shut up.
Yep.
But Avery, it means so much that you would agree to come on as a storyteller. You're a great storyteller. You should definitely see them storytell Blood of the Covenant over on the Rolling Nomads Twitch channel and here on YouTube. And I'm very excited to see what you're going to do with bridging Vampire Dark Ages into 5th edition, and what you're going to make out of it. I'm very excited to work with you on it.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I've already got about 30 pages of notes that I have not yet sent to Huddy for proofreading.
Yep, which is crazy. This, as I say, this is a soft launch because this is something that's going to be a little bit in the future, because we have 2025 booked up, believe it or not, already, and I have something coming even before this. My first foray. This is going to come after I do my own first audio drama, because I'm going to learn how to do audio drama, so I no longer have to say to people, this is not available on Spotify. I have amazing people, including Avery's wonderful partner, who is like the best with sound engineering and working with sound. And I'm going to make my first audio drama that's going to be available here on YouTube, on Spotify, on Podbean, wherever the hell you watch podcasts, wherever that is. I'm doing it. And then when Avery comes along with the Constantinople game, they won't have to worry about that stuff, because I'll know how to do it. I'll be well versed and I'll know how to do it.
Framework, baby, framework. We out here building houses for you to live in.
But thank you so much, everyone. You've been just absolute joys. So let's do thank you for all your questions and comments and thoughts and opinions on these things. We love talking World of Darkness. Follow us on socials. Our names are on the screen. And I hope you have an awesome weekend. Thank you, everybody.